Real Men Feel with Andy Grant encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been told, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but all men can benefit from. If you would like a one-on-one conversation to help you get clear on what you want in life and what's in your way of getting there, visit theandygrant.com/talk and book a no-obligation, no-cost appointment. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Now let's get to it. Hello and welcome to another edition of Real Men Feel. This is your host, Andy Grant. You know, I've done a number of episodes on race this year, and I wonder, have I talked about this enough? And is it overkill? But then just more shit keeps happening, and so I'm really glad to. My guest today is someone I chatted with just briefly, like I do with potential guests, and it really just felt like we hit it off, and really enjoyed talking to him and getting to know him. So, my guest today is author and motivational speaker Ismael Brown. Welcome to the show, Ishmael.
Andy, how are you doing this evening? Thank you, sir.
Very good. I was kind of blindly beating around the bush earlier, but this week yet another Black man was shot 7 times in the back. Jacob Blake in Wisconsin, and I was looking that up to make sure I had the name right in the town, and then I see that a day before a Black man was shot to death in Louisiana, and I didn't know that at all. So, it feels, I feel like an idiot saying, "Oh, this summer of troubles continue," and it's not, because it hasn't been the summer. It's been dawn of time. Yeah, there you go. So, with all this, with protesting, with Black Lives Matter, seemingly at its crescendo, at its peak of people, of all races paying attention, and yet, the violence keeps happening. People, getting shot 7 times in the back. I don't understand how that what anyone is thinking as a police officer doing that. But with all that and my rambling, I'm not sure how I'm feeling. So how are you feeling right now?
I want to start by first saying that, there still needs to be a mandate to arrest the murderers of Breonna Taylor. We have not forgotten about that. It's unfortunate that it's taken this long to receive some semblance of justice. So my heart and my prayers go out to her family, her friends, and just everyone that's out there that's continuously fighting the fight to ensure that those murderers are apprehended. Moving forward to Jacob Blake, and thank God he survived. But what I think about, this is a very unique situation because we've never seen it from the survivor's standpoint, the individual who the harm was done against. So it's going to be on the DA's office to really stand up and take a stance against injustice done towards Black people. And I'm very curious to see how that plays off. Again, I'm thankful that he has survived. My heart goes out to his children who were able to witness such a heinous crime committed against their father. I just think about the PTSD they may experience moving forward, just at the sight of a police officer, the anxiety that they, it's heartbreaking. But to circle back to myself and what I'm feeling, like it's beyond frustration. There's a tiredness, but there's still the willingness to fight and to speak out and to be an advocate for men, women, and children who look like me. We've been doing this since the beginning of time. And I think 2020 was just, enough is enough. With the entire world basically on a standstill because of COVID-19, that's been the blessing of it, is that everyone is forced to take in these regurgitated news cycles and see what's been going on in our community since the inception of time. So that's the upside of it. Again, just the frustration is building, but I think it's a matter of adjusting our reaction to once we feel disrespected and how we go about handling these heinous crimes and these acts that are done against us, and just stand up and go get some type of action in regards to policy change, voting for our local leaders, and doing things in accordance to what's going to be understood from a political standpoint.
And this is not a news show. By the time this airs, things could be clear about the situation in Kenosha, but as of right now, we've just seen this really ending of the situation, and Jacob has turned his back on police and heads to a car, which I assume is his, and is shot while he's like getting in his car. Or I can guess and make assumptions that the story is, he was disobeying police orders. They were afraid he was grabbing a gun, whatever it might be. But the one thing that strikes me is, even if I was ignoring a police officer and walked away, I have no fear of being shot in the back 7 times.
Right.
And that is I think the tremendously telling part of this country. Like there's these 2 very separate experiences of interacting with police.
There's 2 different Americas, and it's triggering for me because I've been assaulted by police physically. In the front yard of my home. I was 18 years old. There was a disturbance at my home between, my parents, and the police were called, and my front door was kicked in. And at that standpoint, I don't know what's going on. I was asleep, and I just rushed into action because I felt as if I need to protect my home from whatever that outside threat may or may not be. So as I get outside, I see it is my stepfather, and he's with these police officers. Then a physical altercation ensues between him and I. Then the police attack me, physically attack me. It's a Sunday morning. My neighbors are home. They're beginning to come outside. My mother's screaming. My sister's screaming. It's 4-on-1. I'm not resisting. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, please stop hitting me. And it got to the point where, I was tased several times. My mom was an employee of the corrections office. I don't want to say the official name, but she was an officer of one of their correctional facilities. And she's very understanding of how, these type of situations are supposed to be handled. And it was just an abuse of power. I was apprehended and arrested, and I was taken to jail.
Was that your first experience with police officers in any way?
From a brute force perspective, yes. Yeah. We've had interactions previously, being pulled over, being harassed, being asked to step out of a vehicle for having a busted tail light, things along those lines. Do you have guns in here? Do you have drugs in here? Just being overly interrogated. But that, again, was my very first, and I pray my last, physical altercation with police.
Okay. All right, good. So it was the last, and did that experience turn you? Were you more, I don't know, anti-police, fearful of police? Like how did it change your perception of the police, or if it did?
Yeah, it did. I was fearful for my life. Like, there's always been a disconnect with the Black community and the police force, just in general. But I think we all are warned against, these type of situations occurring. But once it actually happens to you, there's a sense of shock and panic. And again, even on my mugshot, my face is bruised. I'm bleeding from my forearms as I was slammed on concrete. And like I said, tased multiple times while being cuffed. So it's just that excessive force that was demonstrated towards me. And like I said, my mom had to watch all of that. Mm-hmm. So imagine the helplessness there. And I just think about, I could have easily been a hashtag. I could have been on the back of a t-shirt. It could have been me. So there's this innate fear and also like anxiety when I see police officers.
And so does that continue when you see other Black people being attacked, being killed? Do you have your own PTSD and trauma from that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a reminder every single time. You don't get over it. You just think about, man, I just thank God that I was able to, survive my situation and my altercation. But, it doesn't feel any better that it's happening to anyone else, because those are families that are going to be grieving. Those are children that are going without parents and growing up and understanding that, hey, this could happen to me.
What are some of the stereotypes about being a Black male in America that you grew up with and impacted you? I'm wondering if there are stereotypes that you notice and you follow, or they're stereotypes that you hear and you kind of reject?
Oh, I think, growing up, you naturally buy into those stereotypes because it's a conditioning that I have to be 3 times better than my white colleagues or my white counterparts and peers. There was this element of, I don't want to be a statistic. I don't want to end up in prison. I don't want to end up a victim of, crime and criminality as a whole. So you spend your whole life attempting to combat that, in addition to being raised with a lack of empathy, not being able to express what you're feeling internally. And there's a sense of being disengaged with those around you because you're internalizing all of these things. And then there's this whole other aspect of it where you don't feel as if anyone can understand what you're experiencing, what you're going through. And then compact that with the teaching of you're a man, you're strong, you don't feel, you don't cry. Who does that? And you become a ticking time bomb, just waiting to implode before you start exploding on all of the relationships and people around you who actually do love you and mean you well, but there's just this fury and this anger that's pent up inside of you because of those stereotypes and because of the conditioning that goes along with those.
And of the stereotypes that you were cognizant of growing up, are they all still in place?
No, I had to do a lot of work to be able to shed that thinking and get rid of that perspective. Like that's why I love the name of your podcast, Real Men Feel. That is very valid. And it just makes me more cognizant of communicating and articulating that very sentiment to the generations behind me and even the generations around and ahead of me, because some men never get that lesson.
Yeah.
They never crack the glass ceiling and have the understanding that it's okay to feel, it's okay to communicate who you are and what you're going through.
Plenty of men I talk to recognize that man box and the stereotypes that men are supposed to live up to and not feel and not emote and not cry. But it does seem when I talk to black men that it's all that of being masculine, and then there's more for being black. Like you're yeah, so you're supposed to be even tougher. You're supposed to show even less emotion, right? Is that accurate? Yeah.
No, that's pretty accurate. And just think about how that impacts you in dating, how that impacts you, just across the variety of relationships, regardless of the dynamic. Like all you know how to do is exemplify this one essence of self. And we're humans. We are naturally prone to evolution. We're very complex beings. So to tell me and instill in me that I have to be this at all times, it's sickening.
Why do you think the limitations, the boundaries of what a black man is even tighter than what a white man is? Like, is it coming from overall white culture? Is it coming from black culture onto yourself as a black man?
Wow, now that's a heavy question. I think it's multitude of things, wanting to be accepted by the masses, wanting to fit into certain spaces. I could use corporate America, for example. With my hair, I never had hair my entire life. My mom always told me that you're going to struggle to find employment if you grow your hair. Ensure that you have a low, nice, clean cut, keep your face shaved, all of that, because you're going to be discriminated against. Those are the type of conversations you have to have within our households. Fast forward to, graduate college, I step into my first career job and I say, you know what, I'm growing my hair because now I'm in the door. I've already proven what my value is to this company. You're not going to tell me any differently. Now I'm going to be me, because I think that is a challenge that we're faced with as a people. How do we step into these corporate arenas and be our whole selves when historically we have not been accepted? When you look at the executive boards and the leadership, you don't see people who look like us. Now, there are some companies who are a little bit more diverse, but are they inclusive? And what I mean by inclusive, are they inclusive in regards to the decision making when it comes to the direction of the company, the values of the company, the ethics, and so forth in regards to the hiring? That's the disparity. So for me, I vow to be my complete and true self in every space that I'm in. And I value that because there's a wholeness, because I have to be able to look myself in the mirror day in and day out and be at peace with it. As who I am is not controlled by the perception or the opinions of others.
I hear that. I guess what I really want to ask about is as a young man, that this message of keep your emotions inside, right? That perhaps, you know, being angry is the only emotion, or even maybe even angry you can't show that. Are you just supposed to be stoic all the time, show no emotion? That does that feel like it came from
Mm-hmm.
black culture around you, or maybe it was black culture saying don't show any emotion because fear of the greater white culture around you would punish you for showing any emotion? That, right? Does that make any sense?
No, it makes sense. In my experience, it was taught to me from my community
Okay.
as to how to handle myself um, within certain spaces, how to carry myself. And within the household, for example, like I grew up in a single parent household, where it was myself, my younger sister, and my mother. My father did not live in the household. There were periods of time where we did not speak to each other, spanning, year plus. So for me, there was the expectation to be that man within the household. And how does a man exemplify himself? Through this stoic understanding of life that, there's a toughness to me. I have it figured out. So that's where it came from in my experience.
Gotcha. And I get, you think it was taught to you as a way to keep you safe, or just as a way to that just this is just how it's supposed to be? Like no one's ever questioned it.
I think it's a defense mechanism. Like, this is how you get through life. You don't allow anyone to obtain control over your emotions. There's the stoicness and the toughness, because as a man, you're supposed to be the protector, the provider, and all of these other masculine like characteristics for the home. So it's a tandem combination of those things.
So your book, it's really your memoir. It's called My Own Worst Enemy: A Black Man's American Story. So what are some of the ways that you were your own worst enemy?
Oh, a lot of self-deprecating. I wasn't the greatest fan of who I was. A lot of self-sabotaging, buying into those stereotypes and acting accordingly, not being able to get in contact with my own feelings and emotions. I just did not have the words to describe them or what I was going through. So for me, it was just me subscribing to this idea of Titanism, that I don't feel anything. And like I said, this hatred that I had about myself that just manifested from childhood well into my adult years. And those were all the things that combined to make me my own worst enemy.
So you said you weren't a fan of who you were, and actually you even hated yourself. Were you? Was this like conscious awareness in the moment, or more of a, in hindsight you see this?
It was a hindsight thing. I had to go to therapy to really get a grasp of what my actions were doing to self. I could see what it was doing to others, and, keeping everyone at bay, not allowing anyone to demonstrate an essence of love towards me, because I just seen so many particular experiences where, family members had done me wrong or done my family wrong, my immediate family. I've seen friends turn their backs on, my household when we were in need, and, specifically being homeless. We were staying with a family member. There was an altercation between that family member and my mother. And that family member said, you know what? You and your kids got to go. And I remember being a kid and just, seeing all of my sister's toys being thrown into the front yard. And it was like, for me, if a family member would do that to you, a stranger would kill me. And that was the mindset it was a seed that was planted that just manifested in the way that I viewed relationships, because I had this concept in my mind that I can make it through life by myself. I don't need anyone. I just need time and my own ability to continue to push me forward and propel me through life. And that was a part of being my own worst enemy, because I wasn't warned. I didn't allow myself to trust others or give people the benefit of the doubt to even prove me wrong. I just wrote them off from jump.
Gotcha. So how did you come to realize that you were your worst enemy?
Through therapy, being able to identify my own wrongdoings in these situations. Again, not allowing people the benefit of doubt to express their love, to show me that they were different than, that particular family member. Being able to open up my heart and to, one, forgive myself for the self-deprecation, not believing in who I was, subscribing to those false ideas of Titanism and, being tough. I had to forgive me. That's where it started. And being able to grow from there through therapy, through having these conversations and really going in depth with how all of it was rooted in my childhood. And it really put a blockade around me and served as a defense mechanism so I wouldn't get hurt. That was my entire fear of being hurt, being let down by people. Because again, you've been done wrong at such an early age. It's like a tattoo on the mind. You may not always can see it, but it's there. And that's what it was for me. It was a reinforcement of don't trust anyone. No one really cares about you. Continue to push through life. You got this. You can take on this whole big world out there by yourself.
Yeah.
And through therapy, like I said, I had to just shed all of that. I had to start by forgiving myself, telling myself that I loved me, which was a journey, and extending forgiveness, to that family member and to other people around me who I felt as if disappointed me, one being my father, specifically. I set these expectations for individuals, and if they didn't meet those expectations, I don't want anything to do with them. The role that I played in that was that I failed to communicate what my expectations were. So how could they ever know what I need from them across all of these relationships in order for us to have a fruitful relationship if I don't ever take the time to inform them of that? So that was my journey of shedding that enemy.
Yeah. So it sounds like from a really young age, it was just embedded in your mind that the world's really an unsafe place. You've got you, and that's all you've got. And also you're this emotionally tightened being, not really willing, you're not encouraged to feel, you're not willing to feel because feelings lead to you getting hurt. So what happened to get you to finally open up and even consider pursuing therapy?
I remember being in college. This was my junior year. It was during the summer. I went to the University of Central Florida, also known as the Harvard of the South. Go Knights. And I had just completed a test in our testing center. It gives you your grade right away. I passed. I had a B. And I was walking from our student union on this large segment of grass called Memory Mall, heading to my car. And I just started hysterically crying. That was very uncharacteristic of the way I carried myself. It was shocking. I couldn't stop, and it was beyond concerning at that point. And to give you a little context as to how I carried myself emotionally, I didn't see my mom cry until I was 17 years old. And I kind of looked at her like, what's wrong with you? You need to get it together, because she never exemplified that. So again, back to being fed these stereotypes, I also got a piece of it from my mother, because she was so tough and she felt as if, I have to raise a man. I'm not one, but I'm going to do certain things to ensure that he knows how to take on adversity in life. And that was one of them. Now, in hindsight, years later, and I admire her for doing it. She said, that was one of her biggest mistakes, not showing you that emotion and letting you know it's okay to feel. And it just made you so hard and so serious. And, that wasn't the intent. So I just thought that was incredibly brave of her. But back to that moment, I just couldn't stop myself from crying. And I didn't know why I was going through this. I didn't know why I was crying. And I just felt utterly embarrassed because people were walking by me like, hey, are you okay? I didn't know what to say. At that moment, I didn't have words. And in that very moment, I recognized that I needed help. Like, I can't continue to carry everything that's on my shoulders. I can't continue to take on this world by myself. I need help.
It is fantastic that was your decision. Because for so many men, for so many people, they'll get to that point of feeling bad, emotions are bubbling over, and they'll choose some sort of practice of addiction to cover it up, right? So that you sought help, I just commend you greatly. And I tell people this all the time, and it's from my own experience and experience with clients. Especially people that say, I don't have emotions. No, we all have them. And they're all going to be felt, and they'll come out when you least expect it in sideways ways. But every emotion you've ever stuffed is going to be felt before you die, and you can get in front of it, right? Do some healing, deal with it, or it'll bowl you over. Like, your emotions will be felt,
and it'll drown you. And I'll say, that was my first experience with even being open to therapy, because it was taboo. That's not something Black people did at that time. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. But there was a woman in my life who encouraged it. She was like, you know what? I recommend you go speaking to, there was this incredible woman who worked at our school named Dr. Jermaine Graham. To this day, I still love her and owe her so much. But she opened her door to hear me out. And that was the difference. I just needed an ear. Someone who was far removed from all of these situations. She didn't have a horse in the race, and she could be completely objective, and she heard me out. And I was like, okay, so maybe therapy isn't so bad. Maybe I should, take this a little bit serious. At that time, I didn't, honestly. I would only go speak to her on emergency basis when I got to that cry moment, because I didn't cry. I was like, oh, this is odd. This is weird. That's when I felt compelled to go speak with her. It wasn't until later in life that I felt the need to attend therapy on a regular basis and be consistent with the treatment.
Cool. Yeah, and going back to your mom, and I've seen that. I was raised by a single mom too, and there can be this, I'm gonna overcompensate and make sure I'm raising a good man, and they buy into the worst stereotypes of what a man means. And so that you just get taught this distorted version of a distortion to begin with. But because really, encouraging anyone to not feel is making them less resilient, right? If you can freely get upset and cry and feel guilty and feel happy and joyous, like, great, you're really you take life with the punches and you can deal with it. That resilience is allowing your emotions to flow. Otherwise,
all you're doing is prolonging it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I find when we're willing to feel like you in that moment, you just overcome, start crying, and instead of running and hiding, I'm going to drink this away. I'm going to find a way to just shut this down even harder. Like, no, wow, all right, I'm going to let this happen. And it's probably because you're on a college campus that people stopped and said, "Are you all right?" Because when I've had experiences of just breaking down and bawling in public. And once I remember at an airport, just sitting in an airport gate, and I'm bawling, like noisy, ugly, bawling, not just a few tears. No one, people avoid me. I became invisible. So I was like, there's nothing more invisible in society than a crying man. Like, no one's approaching for shit. But maybe as a younger man, your peers are more willing. But out in public with the masses of our wonderful society, like nobody gave a shit about me.
You said something interesting there. It made me think about something Chris Rock said on one of his stand-ups. He said, a man is expected to suffer in silence in this society.
Yeah.
And I had to sit with that, like, wow, we really are.
Yeah. I say on the show all the time, like, silence kills men. Right. And we've suffered long enough. And suffering ends too often with guys trying to die.
Yeah.
Or the suffering does lead to premature death from physical substance. It creates disease. I said, every emotion is going to be felt. And it can be felt eating an ulcer, right? It can be felt, just feeding decay and disease. And, we all deserve better than that. Right? Nobody needs to suffer. And so I'm so glad and proud of you, for you, that you chose to break that taboo of being silent, of keeping it all and shutting it down. Because again, it just harms you, and it just passes on to everyone else you know.
Yeah.
I don't think at the end of your life you're going to be like, oh man, I wish I just shut up more. Like, what? That's not a deathbed thing I've heard. Yeah, like that's not a thing.
No one.
Yeah. Cool.
So at what point for you, I ask, did you reach that state of, you know what, I can't do this alone anymore?
Oh, I don't recommend my path. So for me, I kept everything quiet from a really young age. Like you, I thought the world's unsafe. It's just me. But I decided to check out. It was only after multiple failed attempts to end my life that I realized, all right, well, I'm not good at this either. So maybe I'm supposed to be here, and there's a better way that I can live my life. And that's what started me to open up and see. But yeah, I had been offered help. Wow. I'd been sent to therapists, and I would just lie. I would just tell them stories. Yep, everything's great. Yep, see ya, bye. Because again, it's for anyone. Until you are willing to be helped, nobody can help you.
But you mentioned suicide attempts, and I also had my experience with that. And it was something that after the fact, it was so devastating. I just receded inward. I tried to shoot myself once. And to your point, I wasn't good at that either. I remember being at my girlfriend's house at the time. She sleep. I'm in the living room. I had recently purchased a AR-15. Why? No particular reason. And I had just reached my end. I was like, nothing's looking up. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm over it. I felt as if my life had been dealt more hurdles and adversity than any victories and wins. So I remember loading the magazine, and I get to the last bullet. I pop it in the lower of the weapon, and everything seems fine. Cock it, and I pull the trigger. Nothing happens. And I start hearing this funny click, click, click noise. And mind you, I'm hysterically crying, but in silence. And it's one of those moments. And, after I came back to my logical state, I looked at the weapon, put the bullet in backwards. So all 29 bullets preceding that last one were in perfectly fine. And that was the wake-up call that I needed. That was the victory. That was the win. Like, hey, it's not your time. Continue to push forward. You're better than this. And, I never shared that. I never talked about it. I wrote about it in my book, and that was a very a dark time, obviously. It was even dark to write about. Just recollecting all of those emotions and feelings and trying to convey it through words for people to consume. So you could imagine when, the book is released and people around me who have this idea of who I am and what I've been through, and, you've always been so strong. So for them to read that, it's one thing to hear, but when you can read it over and over again, it really settles into the mind of like, man, he's really had his fair share of dark moments.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that here. I know it's not fun or easy, but I do believe it is necessary and really serves a higher purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Much like that bullet being put in wrong served a higher purpose. Right?
Yeah.
Cool. So what did prompt you to want to write your book, to share your story?
That book saved my life. That's the best way to describe it. Like, that was my way of getting all the traumas out and everything I was experiencing, everything that I was holding for years because I shouldn't talk about what I'm feeling or what I'm going through. That was my out. It was very therapeutic for me. Granted, it was difficult at times to, think about those situations again. And the funny thing is, when you're writing a memoir, there's still research in it. Like, I found myself calling my mom and asking certain questions around certain situations that, I was too young to remember. And just gaining her perspective and her insight about, those situations. Specifically, when she was pregnant, the doctor actually recommended that my parents abort me. They said that, if they go through with this pregnancy, that I'll be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of my life and they would have to take care of me. So it's more of a flight risk and a hazard to go forward. And he's like, hey, you guys are young, you could try again. So hearing her tell me that, because I always knew she was like, yeah, I had complications with your pregnancy, but that's where it stopped. But as I'm finding out more, it's just like, wow, there's been adversity since birth. And it just clicked in my mind that I really do have a purpose, because if my mother wasn't strong enough or wasn't solidified in her faith, I wouldn't be here today. Like, I'm not confined to a wheelchair. Like, I can walk, I can talk, I can, see, hear, all of the things that, most people probably take for granted, I've been blessed with. So that very potentially dark and morbid situation turned into a beautiful blessing. So for me, I just it gave me a different outlook on life. Like, you know what? I've been tested from the beginning. Keep going.
So was that just a shitty doctor? Was he just misreading things? Like, if you've been healthy all your life, like what the hell what do they think was wrong? Or
no lie, Andy, I've literally been healthy all my life.
Yeah.
I haven't had any major issues.
All right, man. I hope your mom got a new doctor. That's all I'll say. And one thing you mentioned when we talked earlier, you've actually never read your book?
No, it's too hard for me. And I just want to tell everyone watching this and listening, I wrote it. I wrote every single word. But for me, and I went through numerous drafts and reviews and so forth, but I've never sat down and read it from top to bottom. Even in my, editing process, a chapter at a time, go through. But as far as reading it top to bottom, it's hard. It's difficult. Like, a lot of those situations I've moved past, I found some resolve there, but some of those situations, it's just too painful to sit there with. However, I made a commitment to myself. When I decide to bring children into this world, I promised myself that I would read it before they're born. Because at some point, once they get older, I want to be able to give that to them so they can have a full scope of who their father was at one point in his life, to understand that, hey, daddy is human. He's not perfect. He's, don't put me on this pedestal. I made mistakes, because I think that's very powerful. And mind you, I've never raised kids, so this is just me speculating here. But I just think that it's important to give them your failures and paint the whole collective picture as to what life is about, who you are, and don't shield them from the privileges of life. Do it in tablespoons because you don't want them to grow up, paranoid or anything like that. But just have an understanding that, hey, life will test you. It's on you to continuously get up and keep going.
Yeah. And again, as long as you get up and keep going, from my perspective, well, your life had no failures because you always kept going.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, good. I hope. And now you wrote your memoir. You were in your mid-20s when you wrote
Yes.
this?
So I started that book when I was 21. I finished it at 25, and it came out on my 26th birthday.
All right. So that's pretty young for a memoir. So do you aspire to have so many more adventures and wins that there'll be a part 2 of your story?
There's definitely going to be a part 2, but way later in life.
All right,
I need a break.
Yeah.
But I say that because it's, I've heard that frequently, like, man, you wrote a memoir, you're only in your 20s, like how, why? But for me, it just spoke to, they just don't have an understanding of who I am or what I've been through. I even had close friends and families like, why are you writing a book about your life? What have you done? But then when they were able to sit with it and digest it, it's like, I get it now. You needed to do this. And I'm happy that I took that leap of faith to go about writing that book and incorporating the rawness and all of the traumatic experiences without fear. Like, I truly feel brave for doing that.
Cool. And you are. So good on you. So you've had your physical run-ins with the police. You've been in prison, and there's one chapter in your book called Thug Life. Mm-hmm. So please tell me what Thug Life means.
So Thug Life is an acronym by the late great Tupac Shakur, and it means the hate you give little infants fucks everyone. And what that means is that level of conditioning that you give our children, and you continuously feed them that hatred of self and not being accepted in this larger society, is going to manifest into them, and it's going to come out in a destructive facet. And that's what Thug Life represents.
So I wanted you to share that because I never knew that. Seen it. I never realized it was an acronym. Seen it, had no freaking idea. So I imagine the majority of other middle-aged white guys, everyone has no freaking idea that was an acronym. And it's like, why do you want to be thugs? I don't get it. Why? And that this almost if groups have their, for lack of a better term, secret language, it creates that more separation. So I'm like, oh, that's what me. Oh, well, wow, that's a great freaking acronym. And
it is,
I totally get it. And like, shit.
And the interesting thing about it, that was actually his take on a movement. The intent for Thug Life was to be like a new Black Panther party. His mother was an amazing Panther. He came from that ilk of revolutionaries. So for him, that was his wave, and that was his responsibility within the movement, Thug Life.
Cool. So it was much more political than perhaps the white society seeing it. Oh, right. Gangsta want to be more of that stuff, and it's just glamorizing crime. He was really there was a higher purpose.
Yep.
Cool. Now, since you haven't read the book, at one point you also talk in this chapter on women, and you say that you cheated on every girlfriend or women that you ever cared about. And because you said that it was because you didn't have any respect for a woman's worth. When or if did you realize that wasn't helping you?
Oh, I definitely realized. So let's be clear there. Okay. I realized that when I had went through a terrible heartbreak and relationship. I had recently moved to the Washington, D.C. area, and that's when I really got to sit with myself. And it just gave me a time to what I consider a world of mirrors. I was surrounded by myself, and I couldn't escape the images being reflected back to me, and at that time, they were poor images because of the way I had exemplified myself, through the course of how I treated women. And for me, I just viewed it as, this is karma for all of the wrong that you've done, the lies that you told, the selfishness that you exhibited. Because for me, it was all about what I wanted and when I wanted it. And I think there's this huge misconception that the way that a man treats his mother and his sister, that's how he treats, that's not true. So let's just get that out there. That's not true, because I was raised by my mother. I had a great respect from my mother. Don't get me wrong, we had our spats, but she didn't raise me to treat women in that facet. So the fact that I demonstrated myself that way, it just spoke to the lack of respect that I had for their gentleness and them as human beings, first and foremost. But I say a lot of it reflected back to what I saw from men around me growing up. Men around me really perpetuated, having multiple women at their disposal. And, it was in the music that I listened to. My peers also participated in such actions. So for me, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. But again, you get a little bit older, you leave this trail of tears and all of this destruction only to run right into it when it happens to you. And at that point, I say, you know what? This isn't right. Like, I made women feel like this. Yeah, I got to chill out because it didn't feel good.
Yeah, good. It's good to recognize that. And yeah, I share often, we can't change anything until we're aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So until you feel it, notice it, can have a bit of empathy. You see, the effects that you have on people, and you experience the effects that other people's actions have on you, and you don't like it. Then you can realize, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. But
yeah.
So Ishmael, you've gone through a lot in your still young life, and you've learned the healing and the power of sharing your story, and the power and healing of therapy and forgiving yourself. So I wonder, you've gone through the stereotypes, living different ways. For you, what does it mean to be a man today?
Responsible, being accountable, for the choices that you make as a man, and setting an example, for everyone around you. And those are the biggest factors. And just exemplifying yourself as being disciplined. Discipline is the key to everything. Because if you are able to put one foot in front of another, there's always going to be forward progress. No matter what obstacles you walk into, it's great to walk into them instead of falling to them.
And is there one thing, it might be one of those things or something else entirely, is there something you wish more men knew?
That it's okay to feel like that, just that simple. It's okay to express what you're going through. I think it's imperative that you find individuals that are emotionally intelligent enough and equipped with the tools to give you that space, to act as a sounding board and just encourage you to do more of it. And I just really feel like that's, every man needs that.
Cool. Couldn't agree more. What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to getting a haircut at some point. No, all jokes aside. I'm working on a book right now, and this one is completely different than my first one. My first one being the memoir. This one, it's untitled right now. So I'm still working through that. But it's just a polar opposite of my first book. This one is actually fiction, and it's going to be a series. I can give you that first. But I'm excited for it because it's a new challenge. I'm someone who is a thrill junkie, admittedly. And for me, my thrills are associated with overcoming challenges. And, for someone else that may seem like, or that may appear as achieving a goal. But for me, it's like, okay, I've never done that before. I'm going to go do it. So that's the thrill for me. Like, okay, cool. I'm going to do this and I'm going to kill it. So I'm excited. It's different. I had to take a step back from writing to go do some research and understand the craft of fiction writing, because it's a polar opposite from, again, the nonfiction and the memoir lane. So I had to take some time to research some of the people that I consider are greats in that space.
Cool. So what's the best way people can follow you, connect with you, see what you're up to?
Instagram, it's Ishmael, ISMAEL_Brown, BROWN. And Twitter, it's Ishmael_Brown and the number 3.
Cool. And where can people find your book? Is it available everywhere? Or?
It is available on Amazon, and is also available on my website, which is ishmaelbrown.com. And that link is also in my bio on Instagram and Twitter.
Cool. I really appreciate you sharing your book with the world and your time today here with us. Fucking take care of yourself. Be safe wherever you're going. It's fucking heartbreaking that I have to like really say that and mean it so much to black men I'm meeting. But damn it. Yeah, because you're in New York City, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Keep your head down, man. All right. And you shouldn't have fuck that. No, I'm sorry. Put your head up. Put your head up. I'm like, well, I'm gonna want to. You just talked about not shrinking, and here I am trying to shrink you. Fuck. All right. Just be safe. All right, you know how to do it.
Thank you.
Visit realmenfeel.org, everyone. We'll have links for all of Ishmael's contacts and books and ways for you to get in touch with him and follow him and encourage him to have enough adventures for that memoir part 2 at some point.
That one's going to be way better and way more positive.
And thank you for joining us. Wherever you're listening to Real Men Fail, give a like, a subscription, share, a review is always appreciated. And until next time, don't suffer in silence. Talk to someone. Reach out to me if you don't have someone to talk to. Or bug Ishmael. Right. He'll talk to you too.
Please.
All right. Be well, everybody. Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Contact us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Join the private Real Men Feel Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/realmenfeel. Learn more about author, coach, and healer Andy Grant at theandygrant.com. If you enjoyed this episode, it would help us greatly if you gave a review wherever you are listening right now. It takes less than a minute and helps other people discover Real Men Feel.